probably going to be one of my last identification videos, since I'm very close to the end of my entire collection of everything, including fossils. I'm thinking for the next video, I'll probably show you guys my seashells, because I have plenty of those that I've collected over the years. So yeah, I'll probably do that for the next video, but aside from that, I don't have any more rocks or anything to show you guys, so I'll probably just start my whole series of like actually going out there and exploring and showing you guys what you can find out on the field. If you guys want that, let me know. If you want something else, also let me know, because I think I also have to probably do some explanatory videos, but those are like going to be separate series. But in any case, just, obviously let's keep the lines of communication open, because I'm here to teach you guys what you guys are interested in knowing. I am also here to I'm here to show you guys different cool things that I kind of think are interesting and that more people could, benefit from being aware of. But if you guys want to know things that are specific that I haven't thought to show you guys or explain about, I'm always open to that as well. That's a weird way to start the video. That's not usually how I start it, but aside from that, I just kind of wanted to get those like housekeeping items off the list first, so I wouldn't forget towards the end of the video. Like sometimes I forget to say certain things or give you guys a preview. I feel like I always remember to do the preview, but that's besides the point. So obviously, this is the usual setup. If you guys notice that the light is flickering, you probably will have noticed it in other videos as well. The electricity is wired weird in this room. In fact, a lot of things were done weird on the third floor of this house, but that's neither here nor there. I just want to let you guys know that I am aware of that, and it is annoying for me too. I think I've gotten used to it and a little desensitized, but sometimes I know it could get on someone's nerves if they're like a person who notices these sorts of things. But just, be aware. I know about it. There's nothing I can do unless I get an electrician to like fix it, and guess what? I do not have the money to afford. So we just roll with it, I guess. Anyway, so today I am doing a video on my fossil collection, if I could even call it that. No, actually, some of these are actually fossils, to be fair. It's just that I want to let you guys know, whatever you think of when you think of the word fossils, it's not usually what you're going to find out there that are actually going to be fossils, I guess. There's much more than just like preserved remains or like, dinosaur bones and stuff like that. There's a lot more than that. Some of you guys probably already know this, but for those of you who don't, there's like different classifications of fossils. I mean, they could be casts and molds, which are basically, a cast is, let me explain this. So basically, let's say that something, like an animal died, right? And certain body parts kind of disintegrate a lot faster with time. So that's why you usually won't find anything like feathers or muscle tissue or like any skin, flesh, stuff like that. All that stuff goes away pretty quickly over the course of time. But there are certain things that stay. Even bones tend to disintegrate over time, though, just so you're aware, unless they're very well preserved in a very specific material. And that's why you can't just dig in your backyard and find dinosaur bones wherever, contrary to popular belief. Because even the dinosaurs that die that have like specific that leave behind a lot of bones, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna find it, because that could have disintegrated too. It really depends on the material. The best material for fossil preservation is soft material that compacts quickly and it isn't continuously exposed to the elements, that sort of thing. So that's what I learned in school anyways. I could be wrong. There could be more. Obviously, there could be exceptions, like something captured in amber tends to preserve the entire remains of the animal. Stuff like that. It are exceptions to the rules, but there are not many exceptions. So what you'll often find is something like a cast or a mold. A cast is just essentially, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it, because I know what it is, but I don't know how to explain things sometimes. So a cast is basically when certain material, like the dirt, has kind of formed around the whatever body part is left behind, usually a shell or bone, though typically it's more of the shells that you see this happen to. And it kind of forms around the shape and hardens around the actual shape and contours of the shell, let's say. But then the shell itself disintegrates away. It's just that you can see the remains of the animal and you can tell certain things about the animal that existed because the material that hardened, usually made of silica like quartz, captures the essence of that body part so well that it may as well have preserved the remains. That's like a pretty good fossil remain to have. A mold is actually like the, I guess, inverse of that. The thing left an imprint, but it didn't necessarily leave the shape. So you might see, for example, the inside of a shell, right, leaves a specific pattern that's captured in the ground, but it doesn't capture the shape of the ground. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm gonna show you guys exactly what I mean. If I can find any that I have molds here. I have several casts, but molds are a little harder for me to get my hands on for obvious reasons, as you can probably imagine. Molds don't really tend to stay be preserved that long like casts do, or at least it's harder to find because the little lines, for example, that you might see that's, for example, the mold of the inside of a shell could be mistaken for something else pretty easily. But that's, neither here nor there. Actually, I should probably finish explaining about the types of fossils before I start showing you guys which ones I have. There are also trace fossils. You guys have probably heard of those. It's like little footprints, like stuff like that. It's evidence of the animals that once existed, that they leave behind, like tracks. Coprolites, which are like fossilized poop, essentially. Could be considered a trace fossil as well because, burrows, like little holes in the ground that little animals might have made, that kind of stuff. It's like a sign of the animal that once existed, but it is not necessarily a remain or even the imprint of a remain like a mold or a cast is. And then obviously there's preserved remains. That's pretty cool. There's like carbon imprints, which are kind of like trace fossils, but they tend to leave even more detail, but are even less likely to last that long because it's essentially the carbon. If it's a carbon-rich sediment, for example, a shale with a lot of like coal or something like that over. Actually, that coal is made out of remains, but let me not get into that. Let me not keep going on too many tangents. So a carbon imprint is basically just like a carbon, I would say, trace fossil. Like the carbon is what leaves the imprint of, for example, a mold. Like, so you can kind of make it out better than just a mold because carbon tends to leave a darker color that lets you make out more finer details. This happens a lot with like leaves and stuff like that are preserved. So you can kind of see ancient, prehistoric leaves and stuff like that in the sediment. I think I'm blanking on a few others types of like fossils, but those are the only ones that I can really think of. The different classifications, that is. I think that dinosaur bones count as preserved remains. Yeah, they count as preserved remains because obviously those are the preserved remains of the actual animal that once existed. It's not a cast or a mold. Although casts and molds of dinosaur bones also do exist. So yeah, anyways, moving on. Now I'm going to start showing you guys what I have now that you know that there's different types of fossils. There's also specific types of animals that tend to be fossilized a lot easier than others. I'll say that much. As I just said, certain body parts disintegrate a lot faster and it's harder to preserve them, like the softer, weaker tissues and stuff like that. So you won't see a lot of the softer animals being preserved. There's probably a lot of stuff that we're missing in the fossil record because of that. Like, we're never going to know exactly what sorts of animals, like all that used to exist back in the day, because a lot of the softer tissue have just been lost to time, but we can't kind of make inferences from what we do find. One of the most common fossils that we find are like brachiopods, which are basically like marine organisms with shells. We also find like the imprints, mold, cast, stuff like that of shelled organisms like clams and stuff like that. You also have belemnites, which are basically I'm not sure how many of you guys are aware of this, so I'll explain it very quickly. There's stuff like squids and other, nautiloids and cephalopods have like certain internal skeletal structures that go through the middle of them that are actually more easier to preserve than the outside soft stuff, as you can imagine. Squids and all that stuff do not have exoskeletons. They have more similar skeletons to us where everything is in the inside. And that's pretty much, I guess you could say, the only actual hardness to them, because they're mostly made up of soft flesh. But sometimes you can find the hard inner part of squids and other cephalopods that are preserved over time because they are harder, so they're less likely to waste away depending on wherever they were preserved. And you also, a lot of what you can find as well in terms of fossils are like corals. Coral reefs, obviously, I don't think I have to explain that. A lot of those things get left behind a lot easier, and they're easier to preserve because they're already in the water, so they have easier access to the sediments, like once they break off or die or whatever, to be preserved in there. They're less likely to be kind of pushed around by the elements and exposed for too long because they're right there next to the sediments. So that's why you see a lot of corals. I know you guys are probably thinking of stuff like I'm blanking. I'm blanking. You know, let me try to think of what it's called. I know you guys are probably thinking of this whenever you think of fossils. And like, there's a specific animal that is so common, but I cannot remember what it is called at this exact moment. Let me actually look that up. Give me a second. Alright, so I'm back. I remembered. The name of it is trilobites. Those are the extremely common ones along like the East Coast. Like, it has a specific shape. Everyone knows what it looks like who has any knowledge of fossils. I'll probably post a picture up here for those of you who don't. So yeah, I'll put that here, or I'll tell my editor to anyways. So yeah, those are very common, but I don't have a trilobite, believe it or not. I do have other stuff though, so I'm going to start showing you guys that before I run out of battery, because I've already yapped enough, and I know you guys are probably eager to see them. So, we're going to start with, we're going to start just going that way as I usually do. So these are casts. Remember how I told you that those are like the ones that preserve the shape of shells and stuff like that? I have all essentially shelled organisms. I don't have any casts of anything else. Yeah, these are all just shell casts. So let me show you guys. And of course I'll take photos from like different angles for these fossils, because taking a photo from one angle is not going to capture it like it can with a rock. And especially since I can't tell if you guys can see these that well. Anyway, that's one cast that I have. This is another one. You can really see how it fills in the gaps with sediment and just hardens that way. A lot of what creates cast molds and other types of fossils, especially as things start to break away, silica starts to take its place, a lot of that is just quartz. Because quartz lasts, like, quartz is the most longest lasting mineral, as I'm sure I've already said, and it is very easily found in all parts of the world because it's one of the most abundant elements in the world, and in like the crust especially. So that's why you see a lot of fossils will have like shiny like qualities to it. That's because of the silica in them. This is another one, much smaller. And this is more like what you would expect of like a clam, for example. I think these are all clam-like creatures though. Here you go, another very small one. Try not to sneeze. So those are my casts. I have another one that has like casts, and it also has shell imprints. This is a combination of limonite and quartz. That is where the materials are. I'm blanking on the phrasing. Words are so hard, man. So it's just limonite and quartz. That's the material of the rock where these particular fossils are. Let me not try to find smart wording for it. So I'm gonna see if I can find exactly shell imprints and casts. Right. Okay. So this is a cast of a shell. I don't know if you guys can see that. And there's like little shell imprints elsewhere. Where did I see that before? I can't find it again. Huh. Well, Okay, actually, I see one tiny little imprint, little lines going that way. If I can't capture it on the camera, I'll probably take a photo. This is really cool. This is not a fossil. Like, this is not the fossil part, but this is the quartz in the rock. It's just sticking out in terms of, like, the crystal shape. Really cool stuff. And this is more of the limonite. The whole thing is mostly limonite with some quartz in there. Like, all that brown stuff, it's limonite. You see a lot of fossils in limonite as well. Now, this is also shell imprints, but this is chert and limonite, I imagine. Yeah, you see a lot of different types of rock. Chert, chalk, limonite, that kind of stuff. That you'll see a lot of that in marine fossils because that's a lot of the sediment that you find out there. So yeah, this has a lot of shell imprints. I'll say that much. See, here's one. I'm just gonna keep showing you guys the entire rock. You can literally see so many of them here. Even on the underside of it. Yeah, this was a very heavily fossil. Like, I get the feeling that a lot of clams just fell down here when they died and got imprinted, like, into the rock. But wherever this rock came from, when whoever pulled it out or whatever, they didn't manage to keep any of the casts. Like, I feel like there must have been a cast there, or if at least that's a mold. Like, there's a little dent that looks like something could have been there. Anyway. You go a little piece of, like, you know, cool limonite, I'm assuming. Or chert, depending. I can't tell exactly. Some of the fossil containing rocks are harder for me to identify because I can't run certain tests on it without risking getting rid of the fossils themselves. You know, they're pretty delicate, so I don't necessarily want to drop acid on it. This is another one. Yeah, you can kind of see a little shell imprint on the side here. Another little lines here. Anyway, so yeah, that's that guy. Now, this is a belemnite. It's like the internal skeleton of like a cephalopod. They tend to have this like distinctive kind of point at the end that's not very curved. If you see a very curved thing that kind of looks like this, it's more likely to be like a tooth. So, yeah. Belemnite. Now, this guy has a lot of it has some brachiopods, you know, like the shelled organisms essentially, but they tend to be more of like a conical one than necessarily like a clam shape. That's the difference between the two, by the way. And there's also some trace fossils here as well. The trace fossils, though, are not imprints. The trace fossils are really cool in this case because they're actually like little footprints of like a very small animal. I would assume a bird or something similar. See? Those are the trace fossils that I'm talking about. They're like right next to each other. It's two very small trace fossils, but they do exist in the very end of they're in this one corner of the rock. The rest is brachiopods. And these are probably more along the line of like casts. There's one here. And yeah, that's pretty much all for this rock. It's just some trace fossils and some brachiopods. Now, these are crinoids. Basically, crinoids are like they're the starfish of old, I would say. Or rather, they leave those types of imprints. But they're actually the sea lilies that you would see kind of... They're like plants in the ocean. They have a long stem and like these pretty little flowers that would kind of sway back and forth with the ocean as the ocean waves rocked it. Most of the time, you will not find the stem preserved because... Well, actually, that's not true. Most of the time, you won't find the whole thing preserved intact because these things obviously fall apart as they die and disintegrate and, like, get preserved in the ground. But sometimes you're lucky enough to find a stem, like, for example, this one. When I took a picture of this to be like, I think this is a crinoid stem, but I want to make sure. When I was doing my investigations, Google wanted to tell me that this was like cuneiform. I can assure you that it's not. It is too small to be writing on. That's all I have to say. I don't know who the hell could have written on this, but it's certainly not me. But yeah, so that's a stem of like one of the lilies that you would have seen kind of waving around. And yes, it did thicken, obviously. I don't know if it was that thick when it was alive. I imagine it's mostly like the sedimentation of the fossil. These things are pretty delicate from my understanding. So, this is crinoid imprint. It's kind of hard to make out, but you can kind of see like a little shape of something that may have been resting on this rock before. Because they do sometimes rest on the rock. They're kind of like, you know, starfish and stuff like that. Come to think of it, there are different types of crinoids, so those might have been different types of creatures. Something more like a starfish for this one. And this is a sea lily stem, I would assume. This is also one that has like a starfish resting on the rock type imprint. This one is more clear than the other one, though. It's really cool. I really love those. You could also see a little bit of shine here in this dark material. Silica preservation, you know? So yeah, I hope you guys actually saw the shape of that. Fun fact, I did actually dissect some of these things when I was in biology classes in university. Not obviously fossils, but like, you know, starfish and stuff like that. Anyway, I dissected quite a few things in my biology classes, and some of them I did not enjoy dissecting. That's all I have to say. It's very nasty, disgusting work. If you guys have never dissected a worm before, you're not missing out. Anyway, let's move on. So now we're starting to get into like more of the like coral. I have a lot of corals. I will leave those for last, but you know, I have two sponges here. Corals and sponges are not the same thing, just for anyone who's not aware of that. Sponges are more like the creatures that move. Corals tend to stay put. So that's kind of the difference between them. I'm not going to get into any more biology than that, but that's like the basic distinction. This is an imprint fossil of a sponge. And this is a sponge as well. I would say that this is closer to probably... I would have assumed it was a cast, but since sponges are so odd, I'm more likely to think that it's probably... You know, actually, I can't tell. I know it's a sponge, but I don't know if this is a cast, a mold, or what, you know. I am not a fossil expert. That's not the kind of geology that I was doing. I did learn enough to be able to tell kind of what these are, but I had a lot of research that I had to do for these. So, this is just a piece of driftwood. I know that's a weird thing to keep, but I just thought it was cool. Yeah, it's just a little piece of driftwood. This is a freshwater petal pearl. You'll find these kind of in like rivers and stuff like that. Really cool. Very, very thin, very delicate, very easy to break, but very shiny. Actually, it's more durable than I thought because I'm like kind of squeezing it. It's not even trying to crack, so never mind about that. But yeah, these are very pretty. Now, this is like the polished Orthoceras. That's the name of like the organism, and it's just another cephalopod. This basically contains like the fossil of the inside of another cephalopod. You know, like those little squid type insides, like the structure that's what you're looking at here. You can buy these in shops and stuff like that, from my understanding. They're easier to find in stores than out there, out and about. This was a cool find because I'm not really one who goes spelunking looking for fossils, so for me to have this is pretty neat. Actually, I think I got this from, you know those like advent calendars that you can buy that are like different themes? I got a geology themed one, I believe last year. No, the year before last. Last year I did like a rubber duck one. Don't judge, okay? I just like rubber ducks. But like this one was like from 2 years ago where it was a geology themed advent calendar, and you would like, they would give you little minerals. That's probably where I got some of my nice little gemstones from. I know that's where I got the snowflake obsidian from. But yeah, I got some of those from the geology box, but they also had fossils and like actual rocks. It was really cool. You guys should look into that if you're interested, that is. And if you're interested, you could also look into the rubber duck festive advent calendars. Those are pretty cool. That's a neat way, in a new way, that I haven't thought of celebrating the holidays. But that's a tangent that I'm not going to go on. So yeah, these are preserved remains. This is amber, obviously. It's preserved in insect. I know, super gross. I think it's like some type of hornet from the look of it. It's pretty nasty, honestly. It gives me the creeps looking at it too closely. But I'm not really a fan of insects. I don't mind them as much as like my younger sibling does, but it's not like I'm terrified of them. I'm not going to scream if I see them. I won't even scream if I see a hornet. I had to deal with an infestation once. That wasn't fun. But yeah, I just don't like them either. I don't like looking at them too close. They kind of have like this... I feel like there's a primal part of humans that just kind of makes us grossed out by them a little bit. Except for the few people who like them and study them. So, yeah. Preserved insect in amber. Poor guy. He was probably taking a little break and then just happened to die. In the worst possible way I can imagine, honestly. If you think dying in amber, it doesn't sound that bad, really think about how bad it actually is. That's a slow death. And then this guy, not to get too morbid, I don't know if there are kids watching this, but like, that's just something that occurred to me. You can ignore that last part if you're too young to think about death yet. So then, obviously, this is also a preserved remain. It's an oyster shell. It's like one half of it, I'm imagining, but yeah. Preserved remain, really cool. You don't often get preserved remains like that for like things that are brittle like an oyster shell, but I'm glad that I have at least one. And now we're going to move on to all my corals. So, there's two types of corals that you'll usually see preserved. There's rugosa and there's tabulata. That's what I learned in school. I'm sure that there's probably more that I don't know about, but that's all I know. Those are the two basic distinctions that of the common fossils that we tend to find anyways. And they're also like index fossils, if I'm not mistaken. And an index fossil is just something that is characteristic of a period that can tell you kind of the geological placement in history of certain organisms that existed. That's the most boring way I have ever explained anything. I'm so sorry. If you guys want to look more into that, you definitely can. If you want me to explain more, I definitely can. I'll do it right now. So basically, an index fossil just tells you, because like certain creatures you're more likely to find, we have kind of geologically placed certain creatures on a timeline for when we expect to see them in geologic history. And so if you find certain creatures' fossils, this will tell you, oh, so the rock that is found in is probably from this era, because it has all of these creatures fossilized inside of that particular whatever rock you're looking at. Typically they tend to do this when they're looking at layers of geology that have just been unearthed that they're studying to try to figure out when like that rock originated. And fossils really help you figure out like the geologic timeline of layers of rocks. I can get into more of that in another video if you would like, but I don't want to go too far because I might get too excited talking about it and then I'll never show you the rest of the corals. So yeah, there's two types, rugosa and like tabulata. Tabulata is more like, from my understanding, it's more colonial types of not sponges, corals. While rugosa can also show you solitary like organisms that could have been part of a colony. You can also find colonies. Rugosas you can have these little horn-shaped ones, as like you see more of that in rugosa because those are the solitary organisms, while you're not going to find something like that for a tabulata. So that's, I think, a good enough explanation before I continue. So I'm going to show you all the corals that I am not sure which one they are, because these fossils are not always easy to distinguish. I even had a hard time telling which ones were rugosa and tabulata of the ones that I did identify, so that's neither here nor there. This one I'm not sure of, honestly. I don't know which one it is. It's a little hard to tell. I know it's a coral, I just don't know what kind of coral it is. So, no, this is in a different category. Actually, these are modern coral skeletons, because those exist as well. Sometimes you think you found a fossil and all you found is like the skeleton of a modern coral that is still in existence. It just happened to break off. So that's what this is, actually. No wonder it doesn't look like a fossil. These are also examples of that modern coral skeleton. Very much bleached by the sun. This is another example of it. They look more like the corals that you would expect to see nowadays. Now, these are the corals that I couldn't be sure if they were... Well, that's what I get for yapping. I ran out of battery, so I had to change it. It's a good thing I have more than one. Yeah, my editor knows how much I chat, so he bought some extras. Anyway, here we go. These are the fossil... Like, these are the corals that I can't tell if they're rugosa or tabulata. Pretty nice. Like, I have my suspicions about some of them because I don't see certain lines, so I'm tempted to think that they could be one over the other. These are probably all mostly, like... These are probably all mostly tabulata, but I'm not absolutely certain, so... This one looks like it could be a rugosa, but I'm not sure. Because it has, like, somewhat bilateral symmetry. It has, like, a somewhat, you know, horn shape, but... I don't know, I just don't see those lines. Because you tend to see septa kind of radiating from the center. The septa are just lines. I can't really describe exactly, because I can't remember what function they serve in a living organism, much less in a dead one, but... Yeah, so... My assumption, rugosa. My assumption for this one is that it could be rugosa because of the shape, but it could also be tabulata. Wait a minute. Yeah, all I see are little dots that you see in every coral, so this one could definitely be, you know, a rugosa, but it's hard to tell. Some of them are more obvious than others for some reason. This, believe it or not, is a rugosa because it has all these lines that are kind of coming from a specific place. Yeah. I don't think it'll show up on camera though, but I'll have to show you. You'd have to get very close up to see the lines that I'm talking about. And you see these little boreholes as well. And these are tabulata. Tabulatas are very cool. You see this cool little shiny stuff here? That's crystallized silica that's kind of taken the place of certain things that have disintegrated away over time. This is another tabulata. And this is another tabulata. This is really cool. This has got to be my favorite coral that I have. Just because it has like that distinctive kind of house on a house type shape that you expect. That I expect from a coral. I don't know why, but every time that someone says talks of corals, I tend to expect this sort of form. Probably because I wish that's how all corals were formed, because they just look so cool like that, but, you know, I am not God, so. Anyways, these two are just rocks. They could be calcite-rich fossils, I'm not sure, but, like, I'm not entirely sure why the camera keeps not recording anymore, because I've got full battery on this new one, so let me try to get through the last part quickly. Anyway, so it might be that I'm running out of storage. Who knows? I might have to do something about that. But yeah, anyway, so these are calcite-rich rocks or just pieces of calcite. They could be calcite-rich fossils, I should say. This one, very cool. It definitely occurred to me that I thought this might be a fossil when I first saw it, and that's why I put it with the rest of my fossils, but upon further inspection, I definitely think it's just a calcite-rich rock. I did perform calcite tests on, acid tests on them, so I hope that there's no fossils in there. And then there's this guy. He has a very strong reaction. this turned off again. Oh my goodness. So yeah, this had a strong reaction. Now let's see if I can actually record the last part of the video. So this rock has a strong reaction to acid. I actually wanted to show you guys how strong the reaction is, because I think it is so strong I could probably actually capture it on camera without any type of having to zoom in. So first of all, put this here. I'm gonna try to, I don't know if it's actually, yeah, it's having a very strong phase reaction, so I'm gonna drop as much of it as I can. Oh boy. You can kind of see the fizz bottles, like the fizz bubbles kind of jumping up. I don't know if it's being captured on camera very well, but if anything, I'll probably just capture it again on my phone camera and post it alongside here at this point. It's so cool. I have never seen that strong of a reaction to just vinegar. This is not hydrochloric acid, may I remind you guys. This is a much weaker acid. So yeah, definitely calcite rich. And now I will close this video before my camera continues to mutiny, because apparently it's very tired of my yapping. So it was nice to see you guys again. And like I said, probably the next video will be just me showing off my very big collection of shells. Right here, I keep them all on a nice little like plate type thing. Like a little basket, obviously. So I'll probably show you guys that the next time that we see each other again, and that will probably be my last ID video for a very long time until I get my hand on more rocks, fossils, gemstones, etc. If you guys have any ideas that you want to see in video format, like me talking through how I go about deciding which rocks to pick up and which ones I don't, where I go to find them, how you can find them, how to use a rock hammer to get one safely, I should say. And also with permission. Don't go onto someone's private property or preserved property or any like conservatory and stuff like that and just start hammering away, because you're going to get in trouble. And that won't be my fault. I will not take responsibility for that. But yeah, so if you want to see anything like that or further explanatory videos of any concepts that I've touched on, do let me know. Until next time, nice to see you guys again, and stay curious.